Israel early Saturday morning, a Yemeni missile hit the city of Tel Aviv, causing injuries and severe material damage. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum signed decrees restoring land and rights to indigenous communities. In Guatemala, 160 children and adolescents were rescued from a Jewish community for alleged abuse and rape. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Israel early Saturday morning, a Yemeni missile hit the city of Tel Aviv, causing injuries and severe material damage. The Israeli Defense Forces have confirmed that they failed to intercept the projectile, although sirens sounded from Tel Aviv to Ashdod. Neither the Iron Dome nor the David Sling defense systems worked. None were able to intercept the attack. Major sources confirmed 16 people injured by glass fragment, 14 injured while seeking shelter, and 7 victims of panic attacks. Police sources reported major damage to various infrastructure, public and private, in addition to some minor fires. And in Palestine, dozens of displaced people in the city of Honduras queued at a soup kitchen to get a meal for the day. The images show large crowds of people, including children, carrying their pots and struggling their way to the front of the soup kitchen. The children used their hands to pick up the pieces of rice left in the large empty pots, the only food served. It is important to note that the Israeli siege and blockade have prevented the arrival of humanitarian aid. In this context, many bakeries have closed for lack of flour, and many of the residents are turning to soup kitchens in the hope of finding food.
I'm running away from the tent, so my children don't ask me for a loaf of bread. I swear I'm running away so they do not ask me for a loaf of bread. There is still time until it's time to receive flour from UNRWA, and flour is expensive. A pound costs 100 shekels. Who has 100 shekels a day? If I want to prepare bread for the children, I need a pound a day, 100 shekels a day. It is haram, and there is no income. I am a lawyer, but unfortunately now there is no work.
For almost more than 2 months, I have not had flour, and so far we haven't received emergency aid. I have been running to the charities since 6 o'clock, and I have not got anything. Here's the pot. It's empty.
In other news, the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo appointed a new military chief amid ongoing fighting against rebel groups in the eastern part of the country. President Felix Tshisekedi replaced Armed Forces Chief of Staff General Christian Chiwewe and other senior military officers in a reshuffle amid the eastern conflict. The Congolese army has been fighting more than 100 armed groups for years in the mineral-rich eastern region, where rebels are competing for a foothold in a conflict that has created one of the world's biggest humanitarian crises. The situation has worsened in the last year, with more than 70 million people displaced and hundreds killed. In the United States, citizens denounced that the Yale University police are using surveillance and anti-terrorism methods to repress activities in favor of the Palestinian cause on campus. According to documents obtained from a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, the police department collaborated with the FBI, pro-Israeli organizations, and even anti-terrorism agencies to disrupt peaceful student protests. It is also noted that campus police installed cameras, deployed aerial drones to monitor the facilities, and continue to monitor students' social medias. For their part, civil rights groups criticized the use of anti-terrorist tools in the protests and warned that these measures suppress the freedom of student expression. And the United States government announced that it has withdrawn its offer of a reward for the arrest of Syria's new leader, Ahmed al-Shara, after a first formal contact in Damascus with the new interim government. According to official reports, Washington's top diplomat for the Middle East, Barbara Leaf, described the meeting with Shara as positive and that her country would no longer continue offering $10 million reward. She also stressed that they welcome the positive messages from Shara, who until recently was the leader of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham terrorist group, and was known by his war name, Abu Mohammed al-Julani. It is important to note that Leaf's meeting with FTS chief Shada took place despite Washington's designation of his group as a terrorist organization. Now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Ecuador, since early on Saturday, yet another blackout has been reported in most parts of the country, despite the Daniel Noboa's administration announcement that there would be no more such massive power failures as of December 20th. Local media, ordinary citizens, and the Ministry of Energy and Mines itself have all reported blackouts in cities like Cuenca, Ambato, Guayaquil, Oro, and Quito, the capital. According to the authorities, the reason for this massive power failure was that the Chorrillos-Tizaleos transmission line of 500 kilowatts was damaged due to adverse weather conditions, and they say crews are working in the area as we speak. On Friday, Energy Minister Inés María Manzano said on her X account that they have been able to successfully manage this crisis. In a historic event, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum signed in the northwestern state of Chihuahua decrees that restore the rights of the Rarámuri people. The head of the state signed a decree that has the purpose of compensating, restoring, and handing over the titles of 1,485 hectares as traditional communal property for the Huasachique population. The second decree titles 693 hectares with the same principle to the indigenous community of Bosques de San Elias Repechique. The head of state also evaluated with the communities the justice plan for the peoples of the Sierra Tarahumara, and from her ancestral territories, she assured that progress is not above the indigenous peoples. At least 160 children and adolescents from the Jewish community of Leftajo, located in southeastern Guatemala, were rescued on Friday for alleged abuse, including rape, according to the authorities. Nancy Pais, prosecutor of the Prosecutor's Office Against Human Trafficking, explained that the investigations began in November when several minors who had run away from the community denounced the situation. The initial investigations carried out by the agency found the existence of serious crimes related to abuse and human trafficking. The Prosecutor's Office is carrying out an investigation in this community that practices Jewish fundamentalism with its own interpretations, in which child marriage and other similar practices are admitted. And the President of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, decreed extraordinary measures of economic relief for families affected by the increase in interest rates in banks. The head of state assured that there are more than 15,000 families affected by the high interest rates for acquiring homes, an increase that lacks any justification since, according to her, the banks charged an increase before the monetary policy rate was established, an argument they use for disproportionate increase. Likewise, President Xiomara Castro authorized the Honduran Bank for Production and Housing to grant immediate financial relief to the affected families.
Por tanto, decreta medidas extraordinarias de interés nacional.
Therefore, extraordinary measures of national interest are decreed to alleviate the increase in interest rates in beneficiaries with housing loans.
Autoriza e instruye a Banprovi para que
Article 1. The Honduran Bank, Banprovi, is authorized and instructed to proceed with its own funds to grant immediately and according to its law a financial relief in favor of the 15,004 families affected in their housing loans by the increase in interest rates in the banking system from 0.5 to 8.7 percentage points reported until the end of October 2024. The relief should be applied retroactively and stratified from January 2023.
Y estratificada a partir del mes de enero del 2023.
And Cubans held a combative march on Friday led by Army General Raul Castro and President Miguel Diaz-Canel in front of the U.S. Embassy to demand an end to the blockade and the removal of Cuba from the illegitimate list of countries that allegedly sponsor terrorism. Fabiola Lopez with the details.
With 11 days left until the end of 2024, one of the most complex years the island has experienced in its recent history, this is how the Malecon in Havana looks like on behalf of the people of Cuba. The people of the capital march in front of the U.S. Embassy to demand an end to hostility and condemn imperial ignominy.
I am here to defend our Cuba, to defend the smiles of the children, because the unjust blockade should be lifted, because we should be removed from the list of sponsors of terrorism. For all those who have visited Cuba, Cuba is love, Cuba is peace and affection. That is why we are here.
As we have so often accompanied Fidel, we will see each other in the streets, said the Cuban president when calling for this march led by the island's historic and current leaders.
Here is a whole people, is the response in support of the government that reaffirms that educators and the people united will continue to defend the conquests of the revolution and demand an end to the genocide blockade.
The policy of maximum pressure applied to Cuba, according to experts, has marked harmful effects on the quality of life of the people, their access to food, medicines, and essential goods, and the inclusion of the island on the list of countries that allegedly sponsor terrorism, experts warn, is a cruel act designed to maximize the suffering of the Cuban people.
In recent weeks and days, there have been numerous pronouncements by American personalities and from other parts of the world demanding that Biden make use of his power to at least remove the name of a nation that should never have been on that scandalous list. To single out Cuba as a state that supposedly sponsors terrorism is at least false and immoral wherever the accusation comes from. But it is doubly so when the accusation comes from U.S. territory, where paramilitary groups are being trained right now, that organize, promote, and finance terrorist actions against social and economic structures in Cuba.
I am a revolutionary, and everyone who feels truly Cuban should be here. The citizens of Havana are called to reaffirm that we do not agree with the blockade and that we do not agree with that list. We are not terrorists. On the contrary, we give the world health education, and the only thing we ask is that they leave us in peace, that they let us live. We do not want anything else. Long live the Cuban Revolution. Long live Fidel. Down with the blockade.
Many agree on the possibility of an increase in aggressiveness towards Cuba with the new government that will take office on January 20th in the United States. However, they say that in 4 years the Trump administration will be over and Cuba, revolutionary and socialist, will be here.
teleSUR, La Habana.
We have our second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. For our short break, don't go away. Welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin sounded the alarm over the country's declining birth rate. Official data reveals that Russia's birth rate has fallen to its lowest level in 17 years, with just over 500,000 children born in the first half of 2024, a decrease of 16,000 compared to the same period in 2023. The situation is exacerbated by rising mortality rates, attributed in part to casualties from the ongoing special operation in Ukraine, leading to a significant demographic crisis. Despite government efforts offering financial incentives and support for families, these measures have failed to reverse the trend. Putin's administration has acknowledged the urgency of addressing this demographic challenge, labeling the top priority for the nation's future. And 30 years ago, the first migrant ship arrived in the Canary Islands. Since then, more than 230,000 people have risked their lives in the absence of safe routes from West Africa on this route, known as the deadliest in the world. Let's see more.
It has been 30 years since one saw the first boat ever recorded in the Canary Islands arrive on this shore. It happened in Fuerteventura. Unfortunately, this event has become commonplace. From that day until today, more than 230,000 people have risked their lives at sea due to the lack of safe routes along this route.
I remember when it arrived. It arrived at the dock over there, where there is a stone slab. That's where the first one arrived, and after that they started arriving. Even here 2 people drowned, a father and a son.
The Gran Terrail Cemetery has become a shelter for drowned bodies and unfulfilled purposes. After the niche of the immigrant number 1, 2, and 3, there are 42 more deceased due to the lack of space after the humanitarian crisis in 2004. Now, 20 years later, the boats are still arriving, and so are the unidentified dead.
This is another claim that we also make to try to identify the people so that the people, either their family or whoever comes, can claim the body, and that they have a place so that they can take them to their place of origin, and that the relatives can really accompany them.
The Atlantic Migration Route, which links West Africa with the Europe of the Canary Islands, has claimed at least 700 lives, according to data published up to July of this year, a figure similar to the number of deaths in the central Mediterranean. In addition to the lack of safe routes, Andre Mares also denounces invisible borders such as the bureaucratic processes of the different governments.
They do not come with documentation that can identify them, but with everything that surrounds that death and the information collected. The relatives can have more or less information so that they know who this person could be, and above all so that later the DNA test can be compared with the relatives.
So far, 40,000 people have risked their lives at sea on this route, a historic figure that has now become normalized among the population, despite being the deadliest in the world.
Sergio Rodrigo y Lucía Muñoz Lucena, teleSUR, Fuerteventura y Las Canarias.
In Germany, the death toll in the tragic car crash at a Christmas market in the center west rose to 5. This Saturday, during the visit of Chancellor Olaf Scholz to the scene, local authorities released new information on the violent attack. The perpetrator, a 50-year-old Saudi doctor, who allegedly renounced Islam and identified himself with the German far-right, could have been under the influence of drugs when he carried out the attack. Authorities also reported that 200 people were injured, 41 of whom are in serious condition. In Mexico, several booksellers and publishers organizations promote the 17th Alameda Central Book Fair, an opportunity to encourage reading as a cultural activity. Antonio Aranda, our correspondent, has the details.
La explanada del Palacio de Bellas Artes.
The Esplanade of the Fine Arts Palace is a space where literature and social activism converge. Through the 17th edition of the Book Fair of the Central Alameda, independent booksellers seek to promote this cultural habit.
Independientes buscan fomentar este hábito cultural.
Yo creo que tiene absolutamente toda la importancia.
I think it is very important to read. Graham Greene said that being human is also a duty, and the habit of reading contributes a lot to that. So I think it has an impact in some way in making us better people socially.
Thousands of books are offered at affordable prices to make the right to culture effective.
Indeed, when people are looking for a title and they find it, it's like they find someone they're in love with.
Con alguien de quien a lo mejor estuvieran enamorados, ¿no? Enamoradas. Entonces, yo creo que esas emociones son
And I think those emotions are great, and people are grateful to have a title recommended to them.
El que se les haya recomendado un texto, un título.
Además, las editoriales mexicanas.
Mexican publishers are also seeking to open the market to domestic products.
Justamente nos hace falta más difusión.
We need more diffusion because it is known that we make comics. I mean, Mexicans make comics, but they give more diffusion just to international comics, to Japanese comics, because anime is more supported. Everybody knows the traditional Japanese comics, manga, Korean comics, among others. Meanwhile, Mexican comics need more diffusion.
El programa de actividades de la Feria del Libro de la Alameda.
The program of activities at the Central Alameda Book Fair is complemented by cultural activities. For secondhand booksellers, promoting reading is not only a business, but also a vocation.
Antonio Aranda, teleSUR, Ciudad de México.
Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.